Hi, I'm Steve Elville, and I'm welcoming to the studio today Phil Fiore of AXA Advisors. Phil, thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure.
And today we're going to be talking about financial planning for families with loved ones with disabilities. And Phil, what is a chartered special needs consultant, and why is that significant?
So it's currently the most comprehensive credential a financial advisor can obtain that's interested in providing advice to families that have children and loved ones with disabilities. So there's only about 250 in the country, so it's highly specialized, but it's focused on being able to provide advice on things like special needs trusts, wills, guardianships, Medicaid planning, could be different tax deductions, tax credits, all things that families with children with disabilities have to plan for and be aware of.
And Phil, you mentioned for those financial planners who are interested in special needs planning or helping loved ones, families with loved ones with special needs, are you saying that not all financial planners are interested in that?
It might not necessarily be that they're not interested in working with these types of families, but it does require a degree of specialization. It'd be like if you had a knee issue and you went to see, on the one hand, a general practitioner, or on the other hand, an orthopedist or a knee surgeon. Both are going to be able to give you advice, but one's going to be a little more specific and qualified than the other. That's going to be a little more general and could be missing some things.
And I can tell you from law practice in special needs planning, I do run into special needs families or families with loved ones with disabilities who are specifically looking for financial advisors who understand their situation and so forth. There's a feeling that their situation is not well understood by, let's say, the general population of financial advisors.
It's a two-way street. As far as anytime I'm recommending any sort of professional in the special needs world, I want to make sure it's someone that's well-seasoned and well-experienced in that area.
Understood. Phil, what are the problems families with loved ones with disabilities are facing out there today, especially with regard to special needs planning?
So it's the typical problems you would find in most families. How do we plan for today and live for today and fund all the activities of daily living and do all the fun things we want to do? And how do we plan for tomorrow and our future, and what if something happens in the meantime? So there's two main issues that families are dealing with, and they're really not very different than the general population of most families face. The first is, how do we live for today? How do we fund all the fun things we want to do and the activities of daily living? And the second is, how do we plan for tomorrow and plan for things that are unforeseen in the meantime? So it becomes an issue for families with children with disabilities because there's a lot of extra costs that can come with it. There was a recent study that basically said the cost of raising a child with autism is about $1.4 million.
Wow.
And that could even be on the low end. So there's a lot of extra costs that can come with it when you're talking about home modifications, different technology, medical bills that need to be provided for. Now, there is an offset because there's a lot of government benefits that can be available depending on which state someone lives in, but a lot of them are what's called means tested. And what that essentially means is that someone can't have too many assets or too much money to their name or be able to earn too much of an income, or they wouldn't need that government benefit anymore. The unfortunate part is that limit for how much someone can have in their name is only $2,000. So if you're talking about a child that has no ability to earn an income because they have a disability and they have $5,000 in the bank, there's a good chance that their benefits could be shut off and they have no ability to earn anything else. So it becomes a big issue when families are trying to plan for, well, what happens when the parents aren't there and they have a child that's totally dependent on them and could be totally dependent on them for their entire life until they pass away themselves. So it becomes a real issue when we think about, well, if the child can't hold any assets, but they need to continue to live, how do we solve that issue?
Understood. And I've got some more follow-up questions along those lines. Phil, we talked about why families with loved ones with special needs are challenged in their approach to dealing with or choosing a financial advisor. And now I'd like to ask you, why are financial advisors challenged to provide the kind of advice that families need with loved ones with disabilities?
Absolutely. I mean, essentially what it comes down to is it's a delicate situation. you could have a great financial plan done by the greatest financial planners out there. And if you have one legal document that's mistitled or an account or a beneficiary that's incorrect, it could mess up a lot of it. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about financial advisors that want to do the best thing for their clients, but need to make sure that they have all the expertise to handle it, because they don't want to be in a situation where we're legally bound to do what's in the best interest of our clients and not having all the best information to do that.
And could you expound a little bit more on this information? Because in elder law or special needs practice, again, I mentioned this before, there is this disconnect, and families seem to be so absorbed in taking care of their loved one with disabilities. It involves their entire lives, and many of them are exhausted, and all of the things we know about these families, these wonderful people who are taking care of their children. And can you expound a little bit more on this information, that specialized information that they need to know, and the tools that are available?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different programs that can be available for families, and a lot of them are state by state. So if you live in Pennsylvania versus Maryland, you could qualify for different benefits. And if you moved from Maryland to Pennsylvania, you may not know about them. There's different tax deductions that are available for folks when you talk about medical bills. There's different types of accounts that children or adults with special needs can qualify for. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account when you're talking about these types of situations.
Phil, you had mentioned that where a child with disabilities lives actually can have a lot to do with their benefits. And I wanted to circle back a little bit again and just say your chartered special needs consultant designation, depending on where the child lives, of course, but beyond that, what tools are available to you that, let's say, the prototypical or general financial advisor would not be looking at, whereas you would be looking at these tools and mechanisms that you might have available to be able to assist these families? And I must say you have a real passion for it, I can tell.
Thanks. So it always begins with the end in mind. So what is a family trying to accomplish? So generally we want to cover things like, well, what does the best case scenario look like? We live a long and healthy life. Parents enjoy a great retirement. Child lives a great life. But you also have to plan for the worst case scenarios. Well, what if all those great things don't happen? So what we look at are, from a legal perspective, what needs to be put in place, and obviously work with estate attorneys to make sure there's things like special needs trusts, wills, powers of attorneys, guardianships put in place. You have to look at the taxation side of things. So what tax benefits, deductions, credits can we qualify for? And then from the financial side of things, are we saving into the best accounts? How are we funding things like special needs trusts? How are we making sure that when we're no longer here, our children are being in a good position? So there's things like ABLE accounts, there's things with like life insurance, there's a lot of different mechanisms that you can look into that having a designation, went through a lot of training to figure out what those are.
Phil, one of the things I've learned in my practice is how privileged I am to be able to work with families with loved ones with disabilities or families with special needs issues. And these are just wonderful, dedicated people who love their children, and they are just a joy to work with. So I wanted to ask you, do you kind of feel that same feeling when you're working with these families? And I kind of see you have the passion about it as well.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately the reason I got into this field was to help people. And I come from a family that has a lot of background in working with children with disabilities. So when I figured out that I could merge the two, it was certainly a natural marriage. I mean, the best feeling that we can have is providing that peace of mind to families. And ultimately that's a lot of what we do, because every parent just wants to do what's best for their child. And that's the recurring theme that I've experienced in working with plenty of families. So when you can provide expert advice in whatever field, but certainly in this one, that family knows they're doing everything in their power and they're doing right by their child. And that's ultimately what they're trying to do, which makes it what we're trying to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. Phil, what kind of collaborative team do you envision is best to work with families with loved ones with special needs? In your practice, in your experience, what do you like to see in this regard?
So in the professional world, it's certainly a three-legged stool. There needs to be a good estate attorney, a good accountant, and a good financial planner. And they, most importantly, need to all be on the same page with the family and the support team. Because ultimately what is most important is that everyone has the child's goals and the child's best intentions in mind. And everyone could have the best intentions in mind, but if they're on 3 different pages, it can make it very difficult. So any good professional is going to be more than happy as we meet together to figure out the plan jointly, because then we know that we're doing everything most appropriately for the child.
Phil, what else would you say that families need to know as we wrap up?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see is just the lack of action or inaction. And it could be for a variety of reasons. People don't know where to go, what resources are available to them, or who to trust, but there are tons of resources out there, and most importantly, families need to know that they're not alone.
Phil, we'll leave it there. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
For more information, you can contact us at the links in the description.